Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Bull City Coordinators Duke Football Coverage Podcast. Follow us at our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. Follow us on Twitter at DukeFB Coverage, where our DMs are open. Send us an email, bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com. And speaking of which, I received an email from George. I want to read that to you, not the whole thing, but part of it. George writes to say, I just listened to your show with Joe Giglio. It was wonderful. I've been listening to you for some time. I have to admit that now I listen with more relish in the Elko era. I really learned a lot and appreciated the history of the term student athlete. I always knew it was a bunch of bull, but did not realize how egregious it was and how long it's been going on. You provide a thinking man's podcast. Thank you for providing Duke football content. I've been a fan since age 8 when I saw the Blue Devils rally to beat number 4 Navy. I had season tickets for over 20 years once I moved back east. I've considered calling. Well, he talks about he may call in later. George, thank you so much for the email. I really appreciate it. And also, thank you for clarifying exactly when this Navy game was. It was in 1960. Navy came to Durham, ranked number 4 in the country, and were led by Heisman Trophy winner Joe Bellino. I was 8 years old. Navy jumped out to a 10-0 lead, only to see Duke rally to a 19-10 win. They went to the Orange Bowl that year. We defeated Arkansas 7-6 in the Cotton Bowl. My child self, he goes on to say, was outraged that we were on the Arkansas 1-yard line and let the clock run out. I thought 7-6 sounded like a fluke, while 14-6 sounded like a solid victory. Long experience since has taught me just to be glad to win. He sent me a 5-minute clip of the game. Thank you, George, so much for emailing, and thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And for those of you who are out there, hey, give us a call, 540-632-0150, and you can get on the podcast, all right? We've done plenty of voicemails, and we want to keep doing them, although we don't want a factory of sadness. It's 540-632-0160. Had a typo there. We don't want a factory of sadness after the FSU game, which we will get into momentarily. I do want to send some apologies out to my friends over at From the Pink Seats, who do a Louisville podcast. Scheduling mistakes were made by whom is not really important. I was supposed to get them on the podcast, but I apparently dropped the ball there. But don't fret, we have another guest lined up for the week. And turning to that, we're going to check in with our Richlandia correspondent. He is responsible for keeping all of our unrealistic hopes and dreams for Duke football both alive and well. Decades of pain, disappointment, suffering, misery, and just more pain have not caused him to waver from his customary 10-2 preseason prediction, which returned with glory this year. Season 4 of the podcast, our recurring appearance from none other than the original. We'll call him the OG Richlandia. Dad, would you tell us, how are you doing?
Hi, Ben. Good to see you. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Hey, I'm angry. Not going to wallow in the game that we just finished. I'm more angry and upset because I felt like it was fruit hanging low right there for us. But still on the way to 10-2 as long as we get things righted this Saturday in Louisville.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the FSU game. Okay.
Oh.
And we'll get into that a little bit. I mean, by now, in fairness, we should be used to losing to FSU. I mean, it's happened a lot. And actually, if I can find it, I'll come back to it. But during the game, I got a tweet from a friend of mine that I'm going to pull up and read that was actually on point about our historical struggles with FSU. But here are kind of my thoughts about what happened in that game. Riley didn't look healthy from the jump. Our wide receiver core, I like all of them. They play really hard, but I think we could use maybe one guy in the transfer portal, a difference maker. I don't think we've quite gotten over the loss of Eli Pankel, although Hagan's in particular, I thought started to step up against FSU. The only real criticism that I have, I thought we did everything well, and you and I can talk about it. There's been a lot of discussion about it online, and I don't want to be really critical of Elko here because he's doing a great job. His staff's doing a great job, but I think there maybe is a trend generally in college football that field goals, don't matter. And I think the problem with that is we're overlooking the most important analytical stat, which is the number of points you put on the scoreboard. And I think there would have been an advantage to making it a 6-point game, especially given the play calling leading up to that. Look, field goal, field goal, field goal. We all know what I'm talking about. The fourth down call after Leonard goes out. It just seemed like you set your team up to get points, take the points, don't give the opponent a chance to stuff you on fourth down. And I know it almost worked. It almost worked, but don't give momentum to the other team, because that's where I think maybe the analysis, the analytical side of it falls apart, is you stop looking at what happens when a team gets momentum. And it's not like we hadn't seen a long drive before to cost us a game. We saw it a couple weeks ago against Notre Dame, especially when you've got Beelan coming in cold in a tough environment with not a lot of experience. All he needs to get you at that point is one other field goal. Even if you give up a touchdown, you can still win. That's why I think you go for the field goal there, but I want to get the view from Richlandia on that.
Well, I think you can guess how I feel. This is not like the catchphrase from the Bill Murray Camp Counselor movie a long time ago. It just doesn't matter. It does matter. I think the kids lost a little bit of air out of the tires when they saw Riley go out. And to get 3 points at least there, I think would have made a huge difference. So when Florida State, assuming nothing else changed and Florida State did score and take the lead, it would have only been a 1-point game. And you got to feel like even with Riley out, the kids would have still, felt like, hey, this game is right there for us. I thought one of the earlier things that was really unfortunate was when they mishandled the ball in their own backfield, Florida State, and we weren't able to come up with that football. We could have really put them in a much bigger hole early. And I was very disappointed in Ham, not kicking that ball into the end zone when they returned the kick all the way. But I absolutely agree with you on the field goal. The kid's a good kicker. He did miss a couple against Notre Dame, but they were close, and nobody's perfect. It sure would have been. And then when they score again, if nothing else had changed, we're still one score and a 2-point conversion away. It's a 1-score game at 31 to 23 at that point. And then I don't know why in the world he decides to go for it, toward the end of the game, deep in our own territory.
I think that was probably just at that point. It's just desperation time, and you just got to see if you can make something happen.
It's just really frustrating. I think the kids deserved for it to end a little bit closer. And, well, like I said, you're in I think the whole analytics thing, it gets a little, like you said, there's a lot of context that needs to be considered, I think, when making those decisions. And it made me start thinking about, well, how many reps did he actually give Balin this week? When did he know exactly he was going to play Riley? One of his best decisions was when they were showing the sideline, and he absolutely was refusing to let Riley go back in, which was the right thing, I believe. But it made me also wonder, it's been a long time since we've had something resembling the Connett package, and I was wondering with our, his good friend at wideout that also battled him for the quarterback spot, I wonder if we have some kind of wildcat package with him in an emergency situation, and or maybe even Loftus, who's more of a threat to run. I just wonder how many reps everybody's getting and what exactly the situation was going in, because it looked like the decision had been made. I know he said day-to-day, game time decision, all that kind of stuff. But if that's the case, it just kind of makes you wonder how many reps each person got during the week leading up to the game. And, we had a chance against the 4th-ranked, team in the country in their place. And, it's a homecoming, big crowd, a lot of noise. But I think that's what made me angry is in spite of some of the real talent they've got at skill positions. And their quarterback wasn't 100% either, but he was a lot closer to it than Riley was. And when he
And
started,
he's a 6-year senior too, I think, or a 5th-year
yeah, and
senior.
he
I mean,
started getting
that's
loose late. Boy, he's tough to handle.
but
Those
that's
running quarterbacks.
and to go back to the Notre Dame point, and you and I talked about this on Sunday. Hartman's a 6-year senior. I mean, these guys have seen this before. They're not going to be rattled by having to make a long drive, right?
Yeah, the NC State and Florida State were two very different situations to compare how Balin was able to handle, home game, away game, different talent level, just a whole different situation. Suddenly being
Right.
thrown in where he knew, as opposed to knowing he was going to be the starter, for a couple of weeks leading up to the state game. So
Right, and I think, and I want to mention a tweet that I got from a buddy of mine, Robert, after Duke took the early lead. He tweeted at me someone else's tweet that reads, "Duke just took its first lead against Florida State since 2001, a streak of 11 games. Duke has a 0-19 record all time against Florida State." I looked at the box score of that game. It started off great. Duke went one play for seven. This says 79 yards, but it was a 78-yard passing touchdown. So 70 plus yards, almost 80. Went up 6-0, and then gave up 45 unanswered until a punt got returned 68 yards for a touchdown. And boy, the wheels really came off ugly and fastly, and all the adverbs possible. But I want to follow up on a couple of things that you had raised about that game. You mentioned not getting the fumble early. When I first saw it, I didn't understand. I think it was Smith. I was like, how did he not land on that? God, that poor kid, terrible luck.
yeah,
I think Travis's hand comes down and hits it just enough to bounce it away from him and take it away from his momentum. And I remember what Lee Rodeo told me years ago. He's like, man, that ball just don't bounce the way you want it to, because the way it's designed, it was a little more artful than that, obviously. But the way that ball is designed, it just does not bounce right. And the smallest touch can knock it away. But what really got me, and what I thought you were going to bring up, was when we were going to go for it on the fake punt, and they stopped the
oh
snap
gosh,
because the officials, and I know everybody's shocked that ACC officials screwed up. I mean, that never happens. But that was where I thought you were going to go with that, was to remind us how we lost a 4th down conversion attempt because
well,
the
that was
officials thought
huge.
we subbed. Oh, of course.
Yeah. They were maybe half the team was off the field for them, and all we had to do was snap it. And, if we don't score, we at least get a first down and probably a whole lot more on the play. Kind of made me think of if something like that had happened in the shoestring play against North Carolina all those years ago, we wouldn't have scored. But
Right.
yeah, they blew it. And, it certainly could have made a difference.
Well, and I don't know if the rules have changed about this, but this always bothers me is except Lincoln Riley doesn't make his players available after they lose. Okay, whatever. But the head coaches are available win, lose, or draw. The players, with the exception of future Big Ten coaching departure Lincoln Riley, are available after they lose. And those are youngsters. I mean, those are young people, 18 to 20 something years old.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the head official should always have to do a press conference after the game. And maybe the rules changed
That might
on
be
that,
more.
but why shouldn't they have to? I mean, they're adults, they're grown men. Why shouldn't they have to
Yeah.
answer a question about how
It
they
might be more
screwed up?
interesting than bothering the poor coaches in the middle of the ball game now, like they do with basketball. I can't believe they have to put up with questions from the people that are covering the game during the contest. It's insane.
Oh, I agree with you, and I don't like those interviews right before the game, during the halftime, and it's just, I don't know. But I think the league really ought to have to do a press conference every week to explain its mess ups and what's being done to address it, because
Yeah.
you hold everybody else accountable. Coaches are held accountable, players are held accountable, and then for whatever reason the refs are treated as sacrosanct, as above criticism. And I'm not saying that, you know, we all criticize the refs, but we need to do it in a productive way and not just yell at them. But I do think there are times where it would be fair for them to have to answer questions about how they messed something like that up. I mean, everybody else has to do it. You and I are talking about, and everybody online was talking about, against Notre Dame, did Elko make the right call on 4th and 16? I mean, the officials are paid; they're professionals. Why can't they answer those questions?
Don't bring that up again. I've never been a big fan of the 3-man rush, but let's skip that for now.
Well, you know, yeah. I mean, I wish he'd. When I talked to Steve Weissman, Steve kind of explained to me the thought process, and I got
I
it.
understand that.
Right. I got it. And that's one of the great things about being able to talk to a guy like Steve is he brings you a lot of perspective, a lot of knowledge. He's a great guest. I tremendously enjoy having him on and talking to him whenever I can. The only thing I don't understand about that 4th and 16 call is why you don't rush 4. That's the problem I've got. If your thought process is we don't want to let them throw, you can still drop enough guys back with 7 to cover it.
Right, because there's 6 guys. There's 6 guys around the line of scrimmage. There's 5 down linemen and the quarterback. You send 4 after those 6. You've got 7 on the back end to cover 5. It's plenty, or it should be. I mean,
and a lot of people were worried about the secondary going into the season, but boy, our secondary is. Oh my God, they're good. And I'll tell you what, man, Trey Freeman at linebacker, that was what I was most worried about all year coming into the season, was how are the linebackers going to do? But goodness, those guys can really get after it. And I guess we should probably, instead of continuing to do a postmortem on FSU, other than the fact that I have put Mrs. Bull City coordinators on strict orders not to let me order the Bill Walsh coaching book for a cool $600. I'm so close to purchasing that thing to read what it says about how you should kick field goals at times, just for input. I think we should segue into Louisville, and
we can do that. We can do that.
Here's where we are. Here's kind of where I see that the Blue Devils are. And we talked about this with Joe Giglio when we were previewing the NC State game. And again, just like you should listen to my friends from the Pink Seats, you should definitely listen to the Ovius and Giglio podcast and also Law of the Wolf and Young Gun if you want to be miserable and talk about the Panthers, which, God, thank God there was a bye week. All right. But here's where we are. When Joe and I talked about that, I said, look, the Blue Devil, we agreed the Blue Devils can lose to Florida State, but if they want to go to Charlotte, that's it. Okay, this is the only loss we can really afford right now. And now, if we can beat Louisville, and don't overlook Wake Forest because they have a really good coach. I know they're down, but we'll get to that in a minute. That game in Keenan is going to be really, really important, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, so tell us kind of what your thoughts are about this game with Louisville and then transition to the remainder of the schedule.
Well, let me kind of do what I normally do with a little extra with the opponent, or at least what I've been doing, if that's okay.
You will answer the questions posed to you, sir, or I will mute your microphone.
Wait a minute. You didn't even start out asking me how I ended up getting this gig, a little bit about my past.
Everybody has heard. Right. Everybody has heard the story. You wanted to mute your children.
I met this great-looking girl at Clemson a lot of years ago, and how far back do I need to go?
Okay, well, tell us. We don't. We can get into your Duke origin story later. I mean, it's better not to hear that because I don't want the people who listen to this to think that you were doing something wonderful by making me watch all those heartbreaking games. Okay, they have to kind of think that you were just doing something terrible to your son.
It's made you so strong and competitive. It's part of what made you who you are. But anyway, Louisville, as they call it, and I'm tired of all this Louisville hype. For me, the last great thing to come out of Louisville was Johnny Unitas. But without getting into the Pete and Pete episode, let's just talk about their season so far. Okay, Louisville's averaging a little over 34 points a game, but they're giving up 20 and a half a game. They're averaging 176.3 on the ground. They scored 16 rushing touchdowns and holding opponents to 97.1 yards rushing and 7 rushing touchdowns. Through the air, with their quarterback Plummer, they're averaging 285.71 yards per game. He's completing passes at a 63.46% clip, but he's been picked 8 times. He's thrown for 14 touchdowns. Their opponents have only completed 54.4% of their attempts. Even our friend Hartman had a rough night against them. But their opponents get about 221 through the air and 11 touchdowns. So there's some possibilities there. Their punter only has a net average of 37.04 yards per punt. Their time of possession is 31-26 and 28-34 for the oppositions. They convert on third down at a rate of 38.64%, and they're 5 out of 10 on fourth down. Their opponents have converted on third down just 30.53%, and but 6 out of 14 on fourth down. They fumbled 13 times, but they've only lost 3. And their opponents have fumbled 9 times, but they've lost 6. Sacks, pretty much a wash on the season. The Cards have gotten 15, and they've allowed 15. There's a yardage difference there, but they're 22 out of 27 in the red zone with 16 touchdowns. Their opponents have 9 touchdowns out of 14 trips to the red zone. And Jordan, who we talked a little bit about earlier before we went on the air with this, their leading rusher, and he's hard-nosed. He's a tough kid. I watched him just the other day, again, against Notre Dame, and ran really hard, averages 94.43 yards a game, 8 rushing touchdowns, but he is nursing a hamstring injury. And, don't wish ill on anybody, but fingers crossed.
Yeah, he is listed as questionable, and that's one thing I want to ask you about, not to be rude and interrupt you, but
No, go ahead.
One of the things that I liked about Louisville when I was looking at their stats getting ready for this is they seem to really have an RB1 system. They have one main running back.
Yes.
But it looks like he's could be out, which is a problem. And they're also missing a key cornerback.
Right.
But
they're saying, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I do like the fact I like a system that's built around a primary back. That's something that I've always enjoyed. So it'll be interesting to see how Louisville handles that going forward. But you mentioned, this is what I really want to ask you about. You mentioned their defensive line play and their sacks. They've got one defensive lineman who seems to be their major player, and I'm going to mispronounce his name. Jalot, I think it is. I may be getting it wrong.
Oh, he's a small guy, 270 pounds. He has 24 total tackles and 8 tackles for loss.
Yeah, and I think 6.5 sacks. So how do you think our line's going to match up with him? Because that's going to be the key part of keeping the game going.
They also have a couple of really good linebackers, Ben. They have a redshirt sophomore, TJ Quinn, who's got 50. He's actually their leading tackler, 55 total tackles. And his cohort at linebacker, Alderman, has 31 with 4.5 tackles for loss. But, our offensive line has been really good. We've protected the quarterbacks really well. Obviously, there's some added pressure in terms of, who's going to be behind us? Is it going to be Riley? Is it going to be Balin? What exactly is going to go on there and how that's going to affect our game plan. But back to the running back situation, Maurice Turner, strangely enough, is listed as Jordan's likely replacement, but he's actually not their number 2 rusher. I can't remember the guy right off the top of my head who's been their second best running back so far. But and they're missing an offensive lineman now who's got hurt a couple of weeks ago. He's going to be out for the season, Renato Brown. And you mentioned the cornerback, Jarvis Brownlee, who's been a really good corner for him. He could miss the game. He's got a foot injury. And so, they're dinged up at some places, but they've been tough at home. I think they're 3-0 at home, and it's a rowdy crowd. At least it's not a nighttime crowd, so maybe that'll make a difference with the afternoon start. I don't know.
Here is kind of my thought after listening to kind of your analysis of their stats and their team is their quarterback has thrown 8 interceptions, and we have a really good secondary. So I think that tilts in our favor. Um, but the fact that they fumbled, although they've recovered them, ever since Elko has come to Durham, you kind of wonder, my gosh, how is it that we keep having this turnover differential? It has to be a fluke. It has to be a fluke. And at some point, you just have to believe your lying eyes as far as what you see. I think it's just bred into how Elko and the staff coaches these guys. So if they're predisposed to fumble, you got to be thinking we're going to create some turnovers against the Cardinals, right?
Hope so.
Well,
Hope
okay.
so. I mean, if they fumble that many times, the ball's going to be on the ground at some point, you would think.
Well, and we've got, we've got depth at the defensive line. We've got a talented group of linebackers, and we've got a surprisingly deep secondary who should be able to play really well. I don't see us getting intimidated by having to play on the road in Louisville. I mean, we went into Florida State against the best team, arguably the best team in the country. I think we should be fair about that. I think Florida State is certainly in that discussion for the best team in the country, and we didn't blink. We had that game in the fourth quarter. I mean, am I crazy here to say we are not going to be scared of the Cardinals?
Oh, no, I don't think so. And I mean, that's the largest margin. I mean, that's as big as several of the losses put together, that we've experienced since Elko got here. And I don't want to do something that'll jinx us. I was about to talk about the fact that fortunately Plummer is not as mobile, a threat at quarterback as what we just experienced down in Tallahassee. But as soon as I say that, of course, he'll run like a deer or something. But hopefully not. But he is he's an interesting guy. He's bounced around. He started out, I think, at Purdue, went to Cal. Now he's back with his former coach, who's a Louisville alum, the head coach, and they're real happy to have him. He's doing a good job, and brought a number of new people in through the portal. He's got a lot of targets. His big target so far has been Thrash with 39 catches and 6 touchdowns, and he's averaging 91 yards, 91.3 almost yards receiving per game. And they've got 6 other guys that have at least 11 catches so far. I think Bell and Huggins Bruce have a couple of touchdowns each. And so, they will put the ball in the air. I don't think they'll be, they've got to feel confident because of what they did against Notre Dame at home. So, you can't obviously depend on comparison scores and competition. But I think they'll try to do what they normally do, although their running back situation certainly will be a challenge for them, just like our quarterback situation might be for us, which is going to make special teams really important for us. Our punter did such a great job down in Tallahassee flipping the field. If that can continue and Polino can, get us some threes, I think we need to score early if at all possible. If it's not Riley, if it is Balin, to give him some more confidence. But again, it's as good as they've been and as successful as they've been so far in their season. Beating Notre Dame at home, which we couldn't quite do. This is not Florida State we're playing this week.
Well, I don't think that Beelan's going to be too worried or lack confidence. You saw they kept throwing the ball with him, and I think the problem was he comes in a situation where once they get that touchdown and they've got that lead, and I think it was I can't remember. Yeah, it was a 4-point lead at that point, if I remember correctly.
24-20. Yeah,
they're going to come after him because they know the only way that they lose is if they give up a touchdown, and they're going to say, "We're going to try to stop you from throwing the ball. You guys haven't thrown well all night. We're going to do everything we can to rattle you. A field goal won't get it done." And that's really what happened. Louisville is going to have to be, from the start, a little bit more careful. And Coach Johns is going to have a week to prepare. I don't think anybody will know up until probably a couple hours before the start of the game who's going to play.
Right.
Of course, I haven't had a chance to look at Elko's presser today, so he may have announced Riley was the starter, and this whole conversation's doesn't matter. I had to go watch my son steal some varsity minutes tonight in the soccer game in the first half and the
Go
second
Mac.
half. Yeah, he played
Go
really
Mac.
well. He played really, really well. Had a good game, so I haven't had a chance to really dig through what Elko said today. What I'm seeing now is Elko's going back to the day-to-day line. So we'll see how
Now,
that
how
plays
angry?
out.
Also, I'm curious as to how angry the Cards are going to be after a week off and that taste of that pit loss in their mouths. Maybe it's good that they've had 2 weeks. Maybe they won't be quite as angry since they've had 2 weeks to deal with that.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a good point. But I think Jeff Brome, and I remember when I was doing the season previews of all the different teams, Brome can coach. I mean,
yeah,
he's been around a game for a long time. He's familiar with Louisville. He was successful at Purdue, which is not an easy thing to do. He knows what he's doing, and it would not at all surprise me to see this Louisville team come out and be ready, and for him to use this bye week to have them really, really prepared. I mean, he's just a good coach, and you can't overlook a team that he's in charge of. I don't think the interesting part's going to be how is he going to handle these replacements, and how angry is Duke going to be coming out after that game?
yeah. I hope we are pretty angry, and we're as good as anybody left on our schedule. And if we can stay healthy, get healthy and stay healthy, Elko's going to have the guys from all the evidence we've seen through a season and a half. They're going to be prepared and ready to play, and generally make more correct decisions than bad decisions. A few calls that you and I have wished had gone differently aside over the last year and a half, but this is a special season. If we can get this win at their place on Saturday, that'll make us 3-1 in the league, and of
bowl
course
eligible.
The tiebreaker is crazy without divisions. We don't have to go into that because I can't even possibly remember all the options after reading through that recently. But that certainly then puts us in a situation where that game against those people who will remain nameless a few miles away, the following week takes on even more consequential status than normal.
Let's get into that. Yeah, let's get into that in just a minute. But you brought up I want to say two things. One, a lot of what you just said about Elko, you did not say about other coaches often. But as far as being as good as anybody on our schedule, folks, that is something that I heard a lot growing up from the leader of Richlandia. So this time it's actually true, though. Not
well,
like
there
it
were some
was at
other times
time.
it was somewhat truthful too, but we haven't had the best string of good coaches that we could have hoped for. We've had a few from time to time, but
A broken clock is right twice a day, and your
there
predictions
you
about
go.
Duke football did not even get to that for a long time. But let's look at what the tiebreaker policy is this year. I'm pulling this from Saturday Road. Go check it out. SaturdayRoad.com.
I should probably try to stop you here because they've been working on the roof here today, and I think this might make my head explode if we dive into this. But go ahead.
Let's not mention roof in a discussion with Duke football. We're having a good time. All right.
Okay, what is the ceiling? See, roof is the ceiling.
So, yeah. All right. So I need to check in with Blacksburg Chris and see how he felt about UVA beating Carolina. That had to be somewhat difficult for him. But anyway, here is the tiebreaker policy for a 2-team tie. Head-to-head, win percentage against common opponents, win percentage against common opponents based on order of finish. Okay. Combined win percentage of conference opponents. The team with the highest analytical rating per Spot Source Analytics following conclusion of regular season games. chosen by a draw. Now, then there's three. There's for three or more teams, which I'm not going to get into. Although the three or more could happen, but I'm not so sure that that's going to occur here. So really, when you're looking at the only thing that I don't really like is it takes to numbers 3 through 5 to really get through to your strength of schedule. The chosen by a draw, though, is actually not uncommon. There are election rules that will do it by coin flip if it's a tie. So that does
Right.
occur from time to time. Now, you mentioned you mentioned the rest of the teams on the schedule. Let's not looking ahead, but we have to do that a little bit, not ignoring Louisville because I don't think anybody's ignoring Louisville. So let's talk about the remaining games on the schedule after that and how you think Duke is going to handle the remainder of the teams in front of them. Save your prediction on Louisville. We'll come back to that. But walk us through Wake, North Carolina, Virginia, and Pitt.
Well, now you got the tiebreaker thing going around in my head. So I was looking at Louisville's remaining schedule. They've got Virginia Tech and Virginia at home, and then Miami down at Coral Gables before finishing, of course, with rival Kentucky. But well, again, our situation, and until we see, Henry be a little more consistent and kind of growing into this possible situation that he may find himself in, for maybe 2 or 3 of these games. If we had Riley, this would be, I think, a much easier thing to talk about in terms of what's likely to happen. But we certainly, and then here's Pitt, up and biting, Louisville on the backside. But we certainly would probably be favored in those games, except for North Carolina. Although certainly Virginia threw a wrench into that one, and that did sort of take a little bit of the edge, not much, but took a little bit of the edge off Saturday night for me.
All right, let me just interrupt you. Here is the thing about North Carolina is, and people have said different things about this. Okay, I think you could legitimately say that App State has been the toughest game on their schedule all season. And I'm not knocking App State. It's just that they play App State a lot, and there's a lot of familiarity there, and football matters in Boone. Okay, they have a good program.
Oh, absolutely. Okay? And this is what's so frustrating for me about the tiebreaker is everybody's schedules are so different. There's such a vast difference in the strength of schedule between some of the teams that still have a shot at getting to the championship game for the conference. And it's just getting rid of divisions, at least that gave it some sort of, I think, legitimacy when you had to win a division at least to go against the other division winner. And the way it is now with the schedule, such a big conference and not playing the same group of people, it's hard to say that you've really picked the 2 best teams, I think, but in some situations.
Let me go over with you Carolina's schedule, because I said this when I did my preseason prediction. I predicted Carolina, I think, to go 9-3, and so they had an easy schedule. They started off against South Carolina, raging dumpster fire of garbage. App State, good team. Minnesota is 3rd in the Big Ten West, which means they're barely a football team. If you put them in any other conference, they'd be dead last because the Big Ten, also flaming pile of garbage. Come at me.
Yeah, he's a good coach, but they kind of dropped off a little, Minnesota.
Yeah, but the Big Ten is soft. They're pansies. They're weak. They're garbage. They're losers. They're nothing. Pitt, when they were playing Pitt around that time, Pitt seems to have – it's not quite a dead parrot, but they've come back from the dead a little bit. Maybe I'm not dead yet. Maybe that Monty Python bit. Syracuse, ups and downs. Syracuse is a roller coaster program. Miami, all-airport team. I'm sorry. Not smart enough to take a knee. And then, they played Virginia, which, again, Tony Elliott, nice win against Carolina. That's his only decent win there. And they're 2-5? I mean, this is Carl Franks reloaded. And I'm not knocking Carl Franks. Please understand that. It's just a historical comparison. They play a Georgia Tech team that's transitioning. It's going through some rebuilding. Then they've got Campbell. And NC State really inconsistent right now, and they've got Clemson who's also playing inconsistent right now. I mean, they that is a ridiculously easy schedule that they have had. I mean, and will have.
Yeah, I'm
With the
not convinced their
exception of Duke.
defense is improved as some people have suggested, considering the teams that they've been playing. And no offense, and but Virginia to do what they did to them, that was enjoyable. Sorry.
I did enjoy it until Duke ended up losing the game, and I haven't been able to really enjoy that loss enough. But I mean, let's be real about North Carolina. I don't think that they have really played anybody that you could to do the what was it? Who was it that said we are who they thought they were, and we let them off the hook? Who coached for the Cardinals at the time?
Yeah.
I mean,
or
I
was it
think
the Vikings?
he did coach the Vikings, but when he said it, he was with the Cardinals. I just kind of feel like that's kind of where we are with the Tar Heels, because they haven't really played anybody. And let's be honest, there was talk about college football playoff. You can't go to the college football playoff even if you win the ACC if you've lost to Virginia. Right?
Well, if they get there, you have to figure, in spite of the injuries that Florida State's dealing with, and Wilson may be down again. Had that weird landing on his leg when he went up to grab one of his catches. If they were to get there and had to play Florida State, if they're just anywhere close to being healthy, I think Florida State, destroys them. I don't see them going anywhere, and they may not even make it to the conference championship game, the Tar Heels.
Right.
I think you have to consider Florida State the odds-on favorite now, since we weren't able to pull it off.
Right.
But that's still wide open for probably 3 or 4 other teams at this point. And that's why this game we've got with Louisville is so big. To see
Absolutely.
if we can bounce back after Saturday night.
And it was Dennis Green who was the coach that I was thinking of. But to go back to Florida State's remaining schedule, they play, they play at Wake, at Pitt, home against Miami, home against North Alabama, then at Florida. I don't think there's a game in there that you're going to look at and say Florida State would lose. I mean, obviously a rivalry game against Florida, but this Florida State team is well coached and well prepared. Turning back to the Blue Devils, I do think that Duke has a good chance to go 4-1 down the stretch. The only problem is if you go 4-1 now, that drops you at 6-2. So you have got to, if you want to get into the conference tournament, the conference championship game, winning out is obviously the way to do it. There's a chance you can get there going 4-1, but that's not really how you want to get. You don't want to be 6-2. It's going to be a lot harder, right?
Yeah, it's not completely in your hands. Then you gotta get a little lucky with the tiebreak. Yeah.
All right. Well, give us your prediction for the Louisville game on Saturday. Who do you have?
Well, I'm gonna stand with our defense. I think they're gonna and our special teams might go a long way toward making the difference in this one. But no sooner than I say that, a lot of times, the conventional wisdom gets turned on its head in these situations, and suddenly we have an explosion, even if it's with Henry at quarterback or something. But I'd like to get our defensive points back down a little bit. Obviously, that hurt our average with Florida State scoring again late and just having such a big fourth quarter against us. But this depends a lot on, I think, some of the guys that are dinged up for Louisville too, in terms of next person up. Are they going to be able to do as well as their coach would like them and their staff would like them to do? I think we need to score over 20 to be on the safe side, because they have the potential to move the ball. We've seen that, even though their schedule hasn't been super tough, although they have had Notre Dame, and they struggled against NC State and Raleigh, though, winning by a field goal. So I'm gonna pull out my hope, optimism, and that other word that somebody said about me early in the year, and I'm gonna say 24-14 Duke.
Okay. I am going to take the
And,
Blue Devils as well. It's a little unclear though who's going to be playing quarterback, which it's going to be interesting. I think the more football is no different than anything else. You get better the more experience you have. So the more Beelan gets to play, I think the better he's going to do. And I know his 4 for 12 didn't look great, but a lot of those incompletions were avoiding a sack or
yeah,
deep balls, and two hit guys right on the hands, and should have been
right.
caught. So I am going to take the Blue Devils too. I'm going to take them in large part as I was coming into today. I was kind of leaning towards Louisville, but seeing the injuries that they've had and seeing the interceptions that have been thrown, and as you mentioned, the fumble problem, I'm going to stick with the Blue Devils here. I'm going to take them to win by a score of, uh, I'm going to go 27-23. And I think we're going to get back on the winning track. We're going to get to win number 6. We're going to be bowl eligible, which is fantastic. Back-to-back
Yeah,
bowls. That's a big deal, and that should hopefully provide the guys with a lot of motivation. Get to 6-2, 3-1 in conference. So that's who I'm taking. I'm not going to give much of an analysis as to why beyond what I've already said, because it's a little hard to with the uncertainty at quarterback, but that's who I've got.
yeah.
So let's see. All right. All right, Dad. I'm reluctant to do this,
Oh, this ought to be good.
but I have given everybody else an open mic. I'm afraid you may go Abe Simpson on us here with this open mic. I'm a little concerned. You'll start telling us how you chased. What was it? I chased the Kaiser for diggity 6 miles. Uh,
Caught him.
Kaiser
Would
had
have caught him
stolen.
too, except for
Kaiser had stolen our word for 20. I'm gonna somewhat reluctantly give you an open mic. So I'm gonna give that to you now.
Gosh, I can't remember what I'm supposed to ask questions or just ramble on incoherently so you can have an excuse to put me in that crummy home like on 60
Hold on,
minutes
wait,
or
wait, wait, wait. Let me read this to you. This is the quote I was thinking of. Now, my story begins in 19-2. We had to say dickety because that Kaiser had stolen our word 20. I chased that rascal to get it back, but gave up after dickety 6 miles. All right. So you've got an open mic. I will hopefully not regret this.
Well, again, I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's worth having coached a number of sports for a lot of years, and being a teacher for a lot of years. Um, Probably the best thing that Mike Elko did in that ball game, and like I said, I disagreed with a couple of his decisions, but you're always going to do that. Um, was he heard Riley out. Riley wanted to get back in so bad, and that's the kind of kid you want playing for you. A kid that wants to be in there, wants to make a difference. But he heard him out. You could read his lips. He said no way, and finally he just turned and walked away from Riley because I think there was a part of him being the competitor that Coach Elko is. It was maybe weakening a little bit, but he knew what was best for the kid's health, and he turned and then walked away, and that impressed me a lot. He looked pretty good, but it was obvious he wasn't 100%, and it is it's frustrating because you take most of the reps, and you have such a dangerous quarterback in Riley because he's a big strong kid, and he can make plays with his legs, as they say. And it sure would be nice to have him close to 100% the rest of the way. But like we've had with some other guys when they've been out, our tight end who was out, the guy comes in, makes a touchdown grab against NC State, from Henry down on the goal line, and made some catches, in this game. And it's next man up, and the situation is different this week. It's not Tallahassee, and not to put those guys down. They're doing a great job in Louisville. But I think the way our team has responded to challenges and tough losses with so far, has been very impressive in the year and a half that we've been watching now since Coach Elko arrived. And and I think that's why the Notre Dame game and the Florida State game, I know a lot of people going in just felt like, if we could win 6, this would be fantastic. The schedule's so much tougher. But these kids, have bought in from day one when he was hired, and we saw it last year. And the schedule doesn't matter. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. I think Clemson was certainly shocked at the athletic ability and the team speed. And boy, we get to the ball, in great numbers. And boy, that's what you have to do on defense. And I think they're going to be angry and ready to play to put themselves in a position to do something to North Carolina that North Carolina did to us at home last year. So
you mean cheat with the officials?
Well, again, I've lived through a lot of those, more than you have. So, I could tell you stories, from back in Diggity Dick. But I'm looking forward to this one to see how they respond, and I think they'll respond well. And Louisville's not going to roll over. I'm sure they're a little bit upset about what happened to them at Pitt. But it's such a crazy. I think the coastal virus has kind of spread throughout the conference now that there are no divisions. So we're seeing some of these crazy games and decisions. Cade pulling the ball on what was supposed to be a handoff against Miami. Just strange stuff. Miami not taking a knee against Georgia Tech. Just when you thought things were lining up a certain way that they should line up. It's like the whole conference has got that, East, that coastal division thing going on that, produced a different champion for so many years in a row. But anyway, this has been fun doing this tonight. I appreciate having a little extra time to talk to you. It's been fun. And I wish we could go see this one together this weekend. It'd be kind of, me. An afternoon game would be much better, before my bedtime.
Yeah, the problem is A, it's on the road, and B, I was going to try to get down to Wake Forest because my trial got continued, but I'm a little slammed at the moment, so I don't need to miss it. But I would like to remind everybody of, what you said about what happened with all this stuff with Clemson and with Florida State. Or not Florida State, with Miami, and just how kind of weird and funky all that is, and how it's just kind of impacted all the teams. I would just remind everybody I would cite to everybody the words of one Bender from Futurama, who said,
Tragedy.
Let's face it, comedy's a dead art form. Now, tragedy,
that's funny stuff.
And let me tell you, for that to happen against Miami, that was amazing.
That was great. And by the way, I understand Duke basketball is almost back, right?
People keep telling me about this. I have not heard of this basketball team. I've always considered Duke a football school. What is this basketball?
I have. I have for a long time.
I've never heard of it. I think it's a new team. I think they just got it started. I mean, I wish them well. I hope they succeed. I hope they do well, but it's just not something I'm familiar with. I mean, Duke's a football school first and foremost.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, to wrap this up, I will say tomorrow night, because I had forgotten to schedule with the guys from Louisville to preview this game, I scheduled another interview to preview said basketball team with a guy who's been on the podcast before. I'm not going to say who it is. You're just going to have to stay tuned and listen. And I think you'll enjoy it because this guest is going to have a whole lot of interesting things to say, and we're going to preview what to expect from the team. Yes.
You're not even going to tell your dad? You're not even going to give your dad a hint? Oh, man. Come on.
No, you're going to have to listen like everybody else. Oh, you get no special treatment.
But you guys never listened to me when you
What are you talking about? I was the only one of your 3 children who did listen and behave.
Actually, you were a pretty good listener.
Yes. Yes.
And when you were younger.
Wait.
You don't seem to be listening as well now.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell this story, okay? Because I mentioned it to Will recently because I would like some clarity on this.
This ought to be good.
when we were at the NC State, this isn't about the time Will thought the dog could walk himself. We're not getting into that. That was we don't have enough time to get into that. But we were talking about how you raised us as Blue Devil fans and watched football. We went to watch football at Columbo's, the pizza place, and I said this to Uncle Tom and Aunt Mary. I said, well, they were there at the game with us. And I said, it does. There wasn't a whole lot to do in the town we grew up in. So going to eat pizza and watch TV, because we didn't have cable and didn't get some of those channels, it wasn't really a bad deal for us. But I do want to tell one story, since you mentioned that I actually was a good listener, and Will and I talked about this. Do you remember the time Will was working at Columbo's and he stayed out all night and didn't come home, and it came home at like 8 or 8:30 in the morning or something, and you and Mom are like freaking out, and Will comes in completely oblivious, thinking of course he didn't do anything wrong, like what did I do wrong? I'm fine, nothing happened, who cares? And you were getting frustrated with him as you tried to explain to him how parents might be nervous when their kids are not home, when they get up in the morning and the car is not there, and there weren't cell phones back then, so you can't get a hold of them, right? And he's just oblivious to that. So you wisely decided, I'm just going to send Will away from the house so I don't say something I regret. But, and I think you should explain this to the podcast listeners. You told Will to go take the dogs, take two of the dogs, and let them out at Issaquena, which was a trail that people would take, for those of you who don't know. You'd take them up there, you'd let your dogs out, they'd go run around, you'd kind of do a trail hike, people would run through there, whatever. So you said, take the dogs to Issaquena. But
too many people there these days.
You didn't just make Will do it. For some reason, I got roped into it. Okay. I had to make
sure he got home again.
I couldn't drive then, I don't think. Why did I get roped into it? All I did was wake up and walk into the room and listen, the living room, and listen to the three of you, Mom, and Will.
See, there's your mistake right there. Going about your own business in your own house. When your brother's in trouble.
Your explanation is me going and having to do that would make sure Will came home. Okay, well, this may surprise you, but on the walk and on the drive over there, Will did not think he had done anything wrong.
Well, this is the same area when we were out there once, with the animals, and we ran across an ISS slip for your brother, I think, that somehow didn't make it to the house for us to see.
Gotta dispose of the evidence.
He's, we're taking some shots at him here, which is unfair, because there's probably one or two that we could find for each of you that would be fair game. But
not unfair, it's true.
Yeah, he's a pretty good guy too. I'm proud of all of you. I really am. And this has been a lot of fun doing this. And I don't know why he didn't, call it. If he at least had said, I didn't want to call you and wake you up to let you know I was staying out. You might could have, you would have been conflicted as a parent. You would have been angry, but you go, well, that's responsible, so I can't really yell him out for that, because I would want him to repeat that behavior in an emergency situation. But, like you said, that was one of those nights where he just, didn't get it or didn't want to get it, which, we all do it as kids sometimes, I guess.
And I think you were frustrated too, because like he hadn't been out partying. He hadn't been like drinking or anything where you could at least be mad at him and yell at him or be like, how dare you do these things? You're just like, all you did was stay up and hang out and not get into trouble. So I can't really yell at you for that. Like I don't even get mad at you in a justifiably fun way as a parent, where I get to really scare you.
Although worrying you, making you, that's just not a good thing in the mornings, like you said, when you're a parent and you're up and around and trying to get that first caffeine into your body, and you're going, okay, where's Will's car? Where's Will? What's going on?
Yes. Well,
good times.
Yeah, he was incredulous during the walk. I'm sure that shocks you, but he was constantly saying, "What did I do? What? Nothing happened."
Well, I'm sure, like most parents, you've all been pretty incredulous about things we've said or done or not done at times. So
There's
I'm
been
just
a
going to have to
time or
live with
two
that one.
with there's been a time or two with my children where I felt that way, but we won't get into that. We will not embarrass them. So
You're
with
just so mean to them.
anyway, with that, we're gonna wrap up here. We are gonna remind everybody, hey, follow us on our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. Tim and I, over the weekend, as we argued about the field goal call, actually played some different style of tunes. So we may work on something else, try to put some music up at the side at some point. Follow us on Twitter at Duke FB Coverage. We are on all the social medias. Generally, it's at Duke FB Coverage everywhere. And send us an email, please. bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com. And also, hey, guys, call in. Call in 540-632-0160. If you leave a voicemail, you will get on the air, provided it is good vibes only. Only good stuff. No negativity, man. Don't hit me with them negative waves so early in the morning. But hey, keep
Absolutely.
watching. Keep watching. Keep rooting for the Blue Devils.
Don't
And
forget the milk, and let's go Duke.
yeah, I wasn't really asking for notes or for you to interrupt me. I'm just trying to close out like I normally do here. Okay. So, as always, go Duke for diggity 6 years.